Chapter 13. Josie hadn't slept so hard in all her life. A vision of a raven-haired werewolf with piercing blue eyes had stayed with her for hours from the moment she closed her eyes. She hadn't been afraid. Not for 1 second, and the dream went on all night long. In the dream she stood outside Golden Gate Park as she'd done when Ryder left her after following Mr. Boone. The wolf peeked its head out of the bushes. She'd startled at first, but this time instead of running back to Ryder's charger, her feet led her into the park, right up to the bushes where the wolf hid. It stared, waiting, anticipating her arrival. Crouching in front of the shrubs, a sense of calm washed over her. Her breathing was slow and relaxed, her heartbeat steady and even. Not a single ounce of fear flickered through her. "Hey boy," she said, reaching out for him. "I'm not going to hurt you." Moving eerily slow, the wolf backed into the shrubs until only his head peeked out. Even cloaked in shadow, she could see his tall, stiff-legged stance. His thick tail curled up over his back, and his ears perked high over his head. Everything from the wolf's posture to his penetrating gaze screamed dominance. This wolf was an alpha, make no mistake about it. She should have been afraid, yet he was the one hiding, barely peeking his head out to watch her. "It's okay," she said, holding still. "Can I pet you?" The wolf flinched, eyed her skeptically, and then sniffed at her hand. The canine was huge, much bigger than she'd realized at first. Rain drizzled over its fur, making the dark strands around its face stick out. Those stunning blue eyes held her captive. She couldn't look away. As gently as she could, she brushed her hand over his head. It was a shadow of a touch over his fur. Something deep in her heart tugged when his thick wolfy lashes fluttered closed and he lowered his head into her hand. "Ah, see," she purred, stroking his silky soft fur. "There's nothing to be afraid of. You can come out." As he emerged, she rubbed rain out of her eyes. In that split second, the wolf disappeared. Ryder stood in his place, dressed in nothing but a pair of dark wash jeans that hung low on his waist. As he outstretched his arms for her to fill them, streams of moonlight shone off his abs. "It's only me, baby. I don't know you," she heard herself say. "How can I trust you?" Thickly corded muscle twitched and flexed as he stepped closer. "You have to trust the connection between us. I know you can feel it." His gravelly voice rumbled the air between them like thunder. She shivered down to the core. "If you don't let me hold you for the rest of your life, I'll die the loneliest man anyone ever knew." With an ache in her heart, she slid into his embrace and wrapped her arms around him. His skin was soft against her cheek. Beneath that, though, he was rugged, hard as steel. "I'm strong enough to be the man you need," he said. "And I swear I won't ever hurt you." "I know you won't." The words tumbled out of her, but to her surprise she meant them. "We're fated to be together." He held her tightly, her head cradled against his chest. His heartbeat thumped against her ear, soothing away any traces of anxiety or fear that might have been harbored there. "You don't need to look any further. You're mine. I'll spend the rest of my life making you happy." Her heart fluttered with happiness. "I'm yours." And she meant it. She'd said it when they were about to make love in the closet. Even now, after she knew about his lies, his secret abilities, she was no less certain. Her heart beat true for him. "I'm yours," she repeated, relishing the warm glow that radiated through her. "Eternally." She was still saying the final word when her cell phone went off on the bedside table, shielding her eyes from the rays of cornea-piercing sunlight. Josie reached over and fumbled for her phone. Without glancing at the number, she answered. "Hello." She sounded hoarse. "Did she eat gravel for dinner last night?" "Josie?" the voice on the other end said. "This is Liza from the Channel 10 news crew." Liza. She couldn't shake the dream. That wolf. Ryder. "What time is it?" She hadn't meant to ask it aloud. "Nearly 4 in the afternoon." "Not possible." Scrubbing her hands over her eyes, Josie checked the clock. She fell back onto her pillow, her arm draping over her forehead. "Damn it. I'm sorry I didn't call you to cancel. You must be furious." "Cancel?" Liza's voice was much too chipper. "Cancel what, exactly?" "This weekend. The rehearsal dinner. The wedding." Josie sighed heavily as if the carpet that had held all of her dreams was ripped right from beneath her. "Someone should have called you." "I'm sorry. Carrie and Mitch are postponing the wedding. Or canceling. Who knew what would happen in time? I'm afraid there won't be a reason to host a special on my company. I'm not sure I understand, Liza said, pausing. Carrie and Mitch are here. Confusion stabbed needles through Josie's brain. Here where? At Pier 3. We're getting ready to board the Hornblower yacht. What? Liza cleared her throat. You said we were supposed to meet at Pier 3 at 4 o'clock, correct? To film the rehearsal and rehearsal dinner? Everyone is here. Except for you. Everyone. Josie's mind went blank. Mitch and Carrie are there ready to board too. Was it possible the whole thing had been a terrible dream? Could she have imagined all the werewolf drama at Jolly Roger's? Someone must have slipped something in my drink. Liza, I need to ask you something. Josie tripped getting out of bed and stumbled to her closet. And I need you to answer honestly. Well, I am a journalist, Liza crooned. I report the truth as it's relayed to me. As she tossed a simple black strapless dress out of her closet, she said, Do. Carrie and Mitch look happy. If it wasn't a dream, and Mitch really had revealed himself as a werewolf, there would be no way they'd be waiting to dock the Hornblower. They look blissful to me. Liza mumbled something to the cameraman. If you want me to really scrutinize them, they do seem a little tired. When they first arrived, Mitch had dark rings under his eyes, and Carrie's hair didn't appear to be freshly washed or styled. I called a stylist over to work on them, and now they look fresh enough to pose for a magazine shoot. Other than that, they're great. Any reason to believe they wouldn't be? Yeah, the fact that last night, Carrie had said she'd wanted time to think things over, to wrap her mind around what Mitch had said. When the cab had dropped her off at her apartment in the Mission, Carrie had said she was going to put her cell on silent and curl up in bed. Had everything really been a figment of her imagination? The memories of the dream were extremely detailed, though, which was abnormal. She could recall nearly every word, every surge of anger as Ryder unveiled the truth about his nature. No, Josie fired, tossing her pajamas to the floor and stepping into the dress. If they're at the dock, waiting for the yacht to leave, I suspect they're happy, as they always are. Everything's going to be all right. As she yanked the dress down over her hips, Josie ran into the bathroom, put the phone on speaker, and wrestled her hair into a loose ponytail. If everything's on track then, Liza said, I'll tell Carrie you're on your way. Wait, is Ryder there? He showed up late, but he's here. Her throat dried as images of the wolf from her dreams came to her. How does he look? Liza gasped as the yacht blasted its horn. Frustrated. And he's been asking for you for an hour. Her stomach sank. She didn't want to see Ryder. If the werewolf thing wasn't a dream, if he and his friend really were werewolves, he'd hid the truth from her and put them in danger. He should have said what he was before he made out with her twice. Tell Carrie not to leave without me, Josie said, and hung up the call. After Liza announced that Josie would be there shortly, and not to leave without her, Ryder's stomach had been in knots. She'd tortured him all night, plagued his dreams. It was the craziest thing, but he dreamed they were back in Golden Gate Park. Only instead of leaving, she came closer, called him out of the bushes, and she'd been completely at ease with him being a wolf. She'd seen him for what he was and accepted him. He'd radiated warmth as he held her in his arms, and when he confessed that he wanted to hold her forever, he'd never felt happier. Everything he'd ever wanted had been within reach. If only he'd take the leap and go for it. When he'd proclaimed his love for Josie, her reaction had hollowed him. His heart had clenched and then eased, relaxing into a rhythm that lulled him into a trance. It made him want to give Josie more. All of him. Every last breath in his lungs if it meant he could make her happy. As he paced the lot 100th time, a taxi pulled into the lot and circled around. It came to stop in front of the docked yacht, and without waiting a beat, Josie exited. She'd pulled her hair back so that it emphasized the angelic features of her face, and wore a tight black dress that hugged her curves. Hey, he tried to say but couldn't catch his breath. She was stunning. Effortlessly so. Josie. Either she didn't hear him or didn't care to see him. Charging up the ramp, she ran ahead. Don't let her get away. He strode behind her, right as the pier workers ready to close the rail gate. Josie, he called out, following her down the yacht's deck. She finally stopped moments before going inside to join the rest of the party. Hey, Ryder. He could almost read the indecision on her face. She must not have known what else to say. I had a dream about you last night, he blurted. In the park. Her honey brown eyes studied his face. What? I had a dream about us. It felt like the stakeout when we followed Mr. Boone. You saw me in wolf form. What happened? Swallowing hard, she dropped her gaze to the wood-planked deck. What did I say? You said you'd be mine for all eternity. What she'd said last night resonated deep within him. Her voice still sang through his ears. That's not possible. She spoke the words quietly, as if she had to fight for the air to speak them. As she looked up at him, her cheeks paled and her mouth dropped open in disbelief. I had that dream. The same one. Really? Shock pummeled his system, chilling him instantly. He'd heard of luminaries sharing thoughts and dreams, but hadn't fully realized that their connection would never go away. Josie, can we go somewhere to talk away from the cameras? I wouldn't want anyone to hear about what I am. Her gaze searched the room beyond the glass, where half a dozen cameras had been set up to film the rehearsal. You mean you really are, you know? Her lips went white as she sucked the bottom one into her mouth. Even when she was confused and afraid, she was still irresistible. I didn't think. I thought maybe it might have been part of the dream. That can't be real. Oh, it is. Using his heightened senses, he picked up surges of fright. He took a few steps back to give her space. Your sister was able to come around. So I'm sure with time, you'll be able to do the same and accept Mitch as your brother-in-law. Wait, what? She pinched her eyes closed and shook her head. When she opened them again, confusion burned in their depths. Carrie knows? As in she knows? Knows? She didn't think it was a stupid dream like I did. No, she's ready to give her life to Mitch, the werewolf part of him and all. Sweat trickled down his temple. If you would give me a few seconds to explain, I could clarify a few things that might put you more at ease. Now's not the time, Ryder. It's never the time. He took her hand and brushed his thumb over the back of her knuckles. Listen, you can hate me all you want, but your sister loves Mitch and he truly is a great guy. The sooner you can understand that, the better it'll be for them. How things flip so easily. Suddenly she was the one desperate to break them up, and he was the one fighting to keep them together? Wait here, she said, slowly pulling her hand from his. I'm going inside to make sure my sister is all right. We might be able to sneak in a few minutes after that, but I don't think it's going to change anything. As she spun on her heel and disappeared inside the dining hall, Ryder blew out a rattled breath. But everything had already changed. Their dreams had made sure of that. They were destined by fate. No matter how much he tried to stay away from her, she'd still be a part of him, forever linked to his soul. He'd never be free from her. She was his, eternally. She'd said it herself, and his heart hadn't forgotten, not even when he awoke from the dream. Even so, he couldn't bring himself to talk about his wolf form. How could she possibly view him the same way, in the harsh light of day? If he took the chance and shifted and she screamed or fled, it'd break him. But as he thought about pushing her away, his stomach turned. She'd find someone else eventually. It was inevitable, and he couldn't deal with that reality either. He couldn't promise her a future, yet he couldn't live without her. Talk about issues. The next few minutes he spent with Josie Cole were going to be the most important in his life. Chapter 14. Josie dragged her sister toward a mini suite sectioned off at the front of the boat. It appeared to be a captain's quarters, with wood paneling, a twin bed, and a small dresser. And judging from the full-length mirror set up in the corner, the hornblower event team must have planned to use it as a changing room for the bridal party. Liza and one eager-looking cameraman followed them toward the suite. No, Josie said, stopping them at the door. This is between me and my sister. I need a few minutes. Let them come in. Josie spun. Are you sure? There might be some topics to discuss that certain people shouldn't hear. It'll be fine. Carrie yanked up the halter top of her canary yellow dress. Trust me. But this is going to be recorded. Anxiety knotted in Josie's stomach. I don't think it's such. I said it's fine, Carrie interjected, waving in the crew. Once inside, she turned her attention to her image in the full-length mirror. Now you have to Make it quick because we've got a rehearsal to run on schedule and a dinner being served after that. Do you mind if we film this? Liza asked, pointing the camera at Carrie's gorgeous reflection. We're going to edit out a few parts, but certain images like this one with your back will be great for the final piece. We'll do a split shot with you getting ready now and then doing the same thing in your gown tomorrow. Oh, that'll be gorgeous. Carrie turned, grinning, giving Liza a full view of her open back dress. Go ahead, Josie. I'm listening. Yeah, like she could talk about what was really bothering her when the camera was trained on them. She'd go down in history as the crazy matchmaking lady from Sausalito, the one who actually thought werewolves existed. Who would believe her? She'd seen it happen with her own eyes and barely believed it herself. No, this was something that had to be discussed in private, or delicately. How do you sleep last night? Josie moved toward the dresser where Carrie had spread out her makeup bag. Pulling out a handful of bobby pins, she turned to her sister and slid in the first one. I was worried about you. I spent the night with Mitch. We talked all night long. Carrie smiled for Liza's close-up. It was so romantic. I bet it was, Josie gritted, sliding in another pin. Did you happen to talk about what would happen with the dog? What dog? Mitch has a German Shepherd and Husky mix from what Ryder tells me. Josie shoved one pin in her mouth and squeezed another into Carrie's updo. I thought you didn't like big dogs. She could almost feel the camera lens train on them. I like dogs of all shapes and sizes. Carrie cleared her throat. Especially if Mitch owns it. Or Mitch was the big dog. And you don't care about the shedding? Josie fired. It'll get all over your couch. Carrie shot her an incredulous glance through the mirror, and her lips went tight. No, I don't mind the shedding. What about the drooling? I hear big dogs drool. Nope. Don't mind. And the claws? No. Aren't you scared? That one got Liza's attention. She looked up from whatever she'd been scrawling on her notepad and whispered something to the cameraman. Carrie seemed to go tense from her shoulders down her spine. She really did have a nicely toned back. No wonder the cameraman had been focused there. I'm not scared about a thing. Not the dog Mitch owns or any others that might be on his block. Carrie nailed Josie with a glare in the mirror. I love him. And he'll protect me. What was Carrie thinking? Everyone had heard the quotes about love knowing no bounds, but come on. There had to be some kind of limit. Falling in love with and marrying a werewolf was too far-fetched, not to mention unsafe. Are you sure you don't want more time to think about it? Josie pushed, squeezing between Carrie and the mirror. You guys have only known each other 2 months, and you just found out about his dog. Shouldn't you don't know, meet the dog before you move in? That's true, Liza interrupted, checking her nails. Dogs are protective creatures. They could get possessive when it comes to sharing their owner. See? Josie beamed. You should meet the dog first. I have. Last night in the alley doesn't count. I'm not talking about the alley. She shrugged when Josie stared. Last night when he came over we talked and he showed me his dog again. In private where I could get really close to him. I'll admit I was scared at first, but he talked me through it. His fur is soft and his eyes are gentle. I don't think he'd ever hurt me. I hear huskies have soft fur. Liza flicked something from beneath her pointer fingernail. And he probably got the soft eyes from the shepherd side of him. Josie rolled her eyes as Carrie continued on. I think in time, her gaze turned from Josie to Liza. I might want a dog of my own. For me. But why would you? Josie cut herself short. Carrie wasn't talking about getting a dog for herself. She was talking about becoming a dog, a wolf like Mitch. Hell, no. Screw the camera special, the television time with Martha Silverstone. Forget the couple she'd match and the money she'd make. Her sister could not, and would not even think about being bitten and turned into a werewolf if that was even how it happened, all for love. Carrie, you can't. You're the only family I have left. Desperation screamed through her veins as she grabbed her sister's hands. You're not thinking this through. It's too soon. No one will blame you if you say you feel rushed into this and need to take some time to think. But I don't, Carrie said simply. I don't need any more time to think than I've already taken. I love every part of him. I can finally say I'm proud to become Mrs. Carrie Oakey. Liza and the cameraman snorted at the meshing of her future name. Josie ignored them. But you don't even know him. Of course I know him, Carrie said into a laugh. But you don't. Ignoring the cameras, Josie started counting off using her fingers. He lied on the matchmaking application. Not only does he hate the opera and snore in his sleep, but he doesn't want 5 kids and 2 dogs. What he really wants is 2 kids and 5 dogs. Isn't that important to you? Liza huffed. So get another few dogs to play with the husky. Problem solved. Josie pleaded through her gaze. Her sister blinked innocently, clearly not getting the message. Carrie, you can't go through with this. Josie, her sister said, taking her hands and rubbing the knuckles. You match people together all the time. You have a sense for knowing who belongs together and who doesn't. You've never had a misstep. Never had a couple divorce. You weren't off the mark with us. Even after everything I've learned about Mitch the last 2 months, dog issues and all, I love him more than anything. You can relax. But I have made a mistake. Josie's heart jerked to a stop and then restarted. In a desperately erratic rhythm. I was going to pair a man with his ex. Really? Liza piped up. That's strange. Josie nodded. I paired the two without realizing it. Ryder was there. He caught the slip. So you see, Carrie, I can't be trusted to know what's best for anyone, and this whole dog situation is way out of left field. No one could have expected that. You can't go through with it. What about the news special? Carrie tweaked a few pins in her hair and reached for a few others. What are you going to say to Martha Silverstone? Josie's heart wrenched. I'll tell her it's over. You do that. Josie nodded, and then shoved one last bobby pin in place. An atomic bomb. Couldn't knock Carrie's hair out now. I'd do anything to make you happy. I'd close down my entire business if I thought you were putting yourself in a grave situation. That's not at all what I intended. No one is saying it was. Carrie stood facing Liza. Did you get all this? And Liza nodded. Good. Carrie stood abruptly. Now I have a favor to ask you. Well, 2. Actually. Anything. Josie followed Carrie to the door. 1. I want you to give Ryder a break, Carrie said, hand to handle. He and Mitch are like brothers, and a very long time ago Ryder swore to look out for Mitch, to protect him like family. That's all Ryder was doing. No matter how much you demanded him to tell you what was going on, it wasn't his secret to tell. The more I've learned about him the last few days, the more I've come to respect him. He's not such a bad guy, if you'd give him a chance to prove it. He should have told me about this. Josie felt sick, weak in the knees. He should have said something before I started to fall for him. You love him. Carrie spun, her voice full of excitement. I didn't know it'd gotten that far. It hasn't exactly, Josie said. But he's unlike any guy I've ever known. He makes me feel loved. Carrie clapped her hands together. This is perfect. No, Carrie, it's not. Unlike Mitch, who wants a huge family and a house in the valley, Ryder wants neither of those things. Reality had never been bleaker. You were right about him from the start. He's a womanizer who wants to play the field. He doesn't want to settle down like I do. Not now, not ever. He's always been clear about what he's wanted, just as I've been. Her stomach sank. I thought I could handle something carefree and physical only, but I can't. I'll always want more with him. I shouldn't have allowed myself to get involved with a guy like that in the first place. If it's one thing I've learned from all this, Carrie said, it's that you can't choose who you love. Look at me. I'm about to become the future Mrs. Karaoke, proud owner of a big ol' hairy dog. And they laughed. Maybe everything would turn out all right. If there were couples, non-shifters and shifters alike, who were hooking up and staying together, why shouldn't Carrie marry Mitch? He claimed to love her. And she him. He said he was her fated mate, the one who would love her and cherish her forever. The thought was romantic. On the other hand, if he hurt her, if he harmed one hair on her head, Josie would know where to direct the police. Maybe that little tidbit of information would go in her maid of honor speech, just in case. What's the second favor? Josie asked as Carrie opened the door to the dining room. Oh, thank God you said something. I almost forgot again. She jumped, turning back to Josie. Remember when I told you about the vendor who called yesterday? It was decadent and delicious. The wedding cake place? Carrie nodded nervously. Apparently the baker who was assigned to our cake skipped out of town, leaving a ton of cakes unfinished. He hadn't even started ours, and they say the other bakers on staff don't have the time to finish one by tomorrow. They refunded our money, but we're out of cake. Worry washed over her. What are you going to do? Mitch found a small bakery south of Market who said they'd bake us a cake for an obscene amount of money, but they need me to come in tonight and choose a flavor and topper. But you have the rehearsal. You can't miss it. One look at Carrie's hopeful glare, and Josie picked up what her sister was putting down. So you want me to go? Would you? Carrie made praying hands. Please? You don't need to be here for the rehearsal anyway. All you do is walk a straight line and stand to the left. Josie didn't have to think long. Of course I'll go. It's not that far, so if you hurry, you might be able to make it back for the dinner. Text me the address. Thank you. Carrie blew out a relieved breath. So much. I'm the maid of honor, Josie said with a shrug. It's my job to make sure everything's perfect behind the scenes so you can focus on what you're doing. Here. Remember, today and tomorrow are about you and making sure you know what the hell you're doing. I do. All right. Josie cracked a grin. Practice those words with your groom and I'll go save your cake. Chapter 15. This was not what she'd had in mind when she'd agreed to fix Carrie's cake situation. From the moment she'd stepped off the hornblower, Ryder had been glued to her side. Keep your distance. Don't get close. He'll only break your heart. To keep her strength up, Josie repeated the lines over and over to herself all the way there. Bangin' Bakery wasn't far, as her sister had said, but the ride took forever with Ryder's deliciously spicy scent swirling through the cab of his car. She might have set the world record for breath holding. She simply needed space to slow things down, think things through, and breathe. After Ryder parked in front of the small bakery, Josie quickly exited the car and met him on the sidewalk. Jerking open the door, she stepped inside the sweet-smelling shop. Bright light shone down from the ceiling, illuminating refrigerated storage units filled with cupcakes and sample wedding tears. Relieved, she breathed in deeply. Ryder's scent wouldn't be able to drive her mad in here. He was at her side in a heart flicker as a 40-something man emerged from the back. He was well over 6'6", with thick fingers and an abnormally square jaw. He wore black pants dusted in flour, a white t-shirt, and she bit back a laugh. A pale blue apron printed with cupcakes. How can I help you? The baker said, drying his hands on the dainty apron stretched around his waist. I'm here for my sister, Carrie Cole. I believe you were going to start working on her cake and needed someone to check off a few boxes for you. Yeah, all right. I'm Axel, the owner. Of course he was. Axel grinned wide, showing a few missing teeth and back, and led them to a cake topper display against the far wall. Go ahead and pick one of these. First, I'm going to head back and get the sample cakes ready. Won't take long. Under the circumstances, there are only a few flavors available. All right. As he disappeared behind a half wall, Ryder leaned in close. $10 says. The baker has a body stashed in the freezer next to the buttercream. Sadly, I can't take that bet. Josie set her sights on the dozen cake toppers displayed. Because I absolutely agree with you. I'm not sure why Carrie picked this place. It's sketchy. With something so last minute, there's not time to be picky. Ryder plucked a dark-haired bridal topper from the shelf, along with a tall, blonde-haired groom. I've always thought these were so strange. Little clones of the bride and groom standing on a pile of sugar. Not all of them are standing. Josie pointed to a topper where the bride was dragging the groom to the altar. Look at that one. He laughed. That's probably a more accurate depiction of the weddings I've been involved in. Sighing, Josie shook her head. His words were another reminder of the hesitation, no, the hatred he harbored toward weddings. Keep your distance. Don't get close. He'll only break your heart. Some people have senses of humor, she retorted, flicking a topper with a groom on his knees begging forgiveness. Some might think this is accurate, too. Touché, he said, replacing the tiny groom in his hand. Don't carry in. Mitch already have one of these, though the one they picked before couldn't. They use it for this cake. Josie shook her head. Carrie had originally wanted 2 hearts made from blown sugar to top the cake. Under the circumstances, this baker said he wouldn't have time for that. He said to kiss Ryder fumbled with the bride in his hand, caught her, and replaced her on the shelf. Excuse me. Kiss. Josie picked up 2 silver entwined hearts and eyed them carefully. K-S. S. As in keep it simple, stupid. Oh, right. Ryder nodded slowly. On the topic of keeping it simple, I wanted to apologize for the ways things went down last night. I'm truly sorry. That wasn't what I had in mind when I insisted Mitch tell your sister. Choosing the tangled heart cake topper, she took a seat at a small table near the front windows. He slid into the seat across from her, leaned over the table and clasped his hands in front of him. Mitch should have told your sister another time. Would have been more appropriate to share that information when it was only the 2 of them. She gawked. I deserve to know what was going on just as much as Carrie, especially since they had something going on too. Or she corrected mentally. At least she thought they had. Keep your distance. His gaze penetrated deep, heating her through. Of course you had a right to. No. And now she's seriously considering. Josie lowered her voice to a whisper. Investing in fur once a month. Ryder grinned brightly, stopping her heart. Is she really? Mitch is going to flip. Being with your sister is the only thing he's wanted since the first moment he met her. Didn't you hear what I said? Her voice ticked higher on the freakout scale. She wants to turn into what you are. Shrugging, he leaned back in his chair. It's not so bad. The pack has an excellent support system and Mitch will help her through it. There's a sort of underground community in the city. A pack of born and turned wolves who support one another in business and shifting matters. We're more common than you think, though we live under the radar. All of this is so bizarre. Planting her elbows on the table, Josie dropped her head into her hands and scrubbed her face. I feel like someone yanked back Oz's curtain. How was it possible that she was sitting across from a werewolf having a perfectly rational conversation? She looked up and met his eyes. The gleam in them was understanding, surprisingly gentle. Don't get close. Although she hadn't thought about it until this moment, a memory of something Mitch had said the other night echoed through her head. Mitch said he and Carrie were fated to be together. She twirled the cake topper in her fingers. What did he mean by that? Ryder opened his mouth to answer, but clamped it shut when Axel swept into the room carrying a large plate teeming with cake samples. Setting it in front of them, he said, the ones on the right are chocolate with chocolate icing, the left are butterscotch with vanilla icing, and the center row is red velvet. Thank you, Ryder said with a dismissive nod. We'll let you know. Take your time. Axel shot him an edgy glare as he turned and walked away. But as he went, he mumbled, it's not like I don't have a 3-tier cake to bake and deliver by tomorrow night to save your ass. Josie squelched a laugh and shook her head. I see why Carrie wanted me to come and check these out in person. She trusts you. Ryder shoved a chocolate into his mouth and chomped away. Damn, the ogre can cook. Swiping a napkin over his mouth, he said, there. Called luminaries, by the way. The chocolate ones? Frowning, she picked up a moist square. How do you know? He grinned from the side of his mouth. Not the cake, the fated mates. Oh, right. To keep him talking, she bit into the chocolate one and took her time chewing. As the satin-like chocolate glaze hit her taste buds, she moaned and then covered her mouth with her hand. It wasn't too sweet, but it was lush and moist, and oh god, the best thing she'd ever tasted outside of Ryder's lips. He shifted in his seat as if he was suddenly uncomfortable. Werewolves have luminaries, fated mates. He rattled without meeting her eyes. Who are the ones destined to be with them for 1,000 years? They go through the bonding process and extend their lives, that is. He sampled the butterscotch. His eyebrows hitched as he said, Mitch found his fated mate in Carrie. That's what he meant. Have you found yours? The question flew from her mouth before she could catch it. I'm sorry, she said, fumbling for another piece of cake. That was none of my business. But damn if she wasn't aching to know. You, he said and paused, eyeing her mouth. She went tense, rigid, stopped chewing and stared back. Could he really have meant that she have frosting on your bottom lip? Oh god. She'd been stupid to automatically assume she was his fated mate. Swiping a napkin over her mouth, she lowered her gaze to the plate. An embarrassed blush warmed her cheeks. Change the subject. So my sister's going to live 1,000 years. You still didn't get it, he said. Here, let me. Reaching over, Ryder gently stroked the pad of his thumb across her lower lip. She shivered as he hesitated, his heated gaze catching hers before he removed his hand. Her lip tingled where he'd touched her. Molten heat bloomed down her neck and through her chest. Screw staying away, keeping distance, or being heartbroken. Ryder could probably burn her, but getting close to the fire felt so damn good. Her life will extend if she goes through the bonding ceremony with him. He sucked traces of lingering chocolate off his thumb, rendering her speechless. But that's up to her. Confusion pricked her. Probably had something to do with the majorly hot distraction across the table who wouldn't stop sucking frosting off his fingers. Whatever the reason, more questions arose in her head than answers. Mitch said he was attacked and that's how he was turned into a wolf, but my sister can choose? How does that work? Ryder's piercing blue eyes twinkled with something that resembled hopefulness. But what would he have to be hopeful about? Some shifters are born to wolf parents and can turn at whim, although the urge is usually greatest during times of emotional excitement. Others, like Mitch and me, were attacked in the street. Well, for me it was the back alley of a bar 3 years ago. Her heart softened as he spoke. He must have been terrified. That's terrible. Had no idea. How could you? His words were sharp, but his voice was solemn. We were bitten on 2 pulse points by a rogue wolf. That's what started the transition. That changed our lives forever. The process isn't always painful. In fact, I've heard it can be erotic for lovers during the bonding ceremony. Erotic? She was all ears, elbows down on the table. But for us it was awful. Probably one of the most traumatic experiences of our lives. She ached for him, for the pain he must have gone through. You said a rogue changed you? What does that word mean if you're a wolf? One who refuses to follow the wolf pack's rules. Thanks to the city's new alpha, the numbers of rogues are near zero. He spoke casually, as if he were talking about their own state government. The threat is nearly gone now, and you're with me, so you don't have to worry. Her stomach tumbled. I'm with you. For now anyway. Leaning forward slowly, he slid his hands across the table. You have to understand, I didn't want to tell you about what I was because I thought you were better off not knowing about any of this. You could go on living your life. Blissfully ignorant, she interrupted. Safe. You'd be protected by that ignorance. He shoved a red velvet cake into his mouth. If you didn't know about werewolves, you wouldn't be brought into this crazy life of mine. It's only been 3 years and I still struggle with what I am. Mitch has a better handle on things than I do. What do you mean? I've had problems controlling my anger in the past. He stared at the cakes, giving them all his attention, as if he couldn't look her in the eye. It's the reason we can never be together the way you want. She squinted, narrowing her eyes at him. I don't understand. What problems? He stiffened, dropping the cake he'd picked up. Before we were attacked by the rogues, I'd been dating a woman for about a year. Things were getting serious, at least on my end. Josie leaned back as jealousy trickled into her chest. I hadn't shifted yet, but the phase of the full moon had just started, so I wasn't sure what to expect. His gaze flickered up to hers and he held it. There. I came home from work one day and caught her in bed with her boss. Oh my God, she breathed. He nodded slowly. I lost it. I shifted for the first time and my worst fears came alive. I became a monster in her eyes. Something I can never forget. He paused and she let the silence linger between them. There were no words to express the maelstrom of emotions plaguing her. But surprisingly, fear was nowhere in her head or heart. I tried to date again after that, he said. But each time I shifted I was terrified of becoming the monster again, of them seeing the real me. Did you hurt anyone? God, no, Josie. He leaned across the table, his gaze burning deep. Nothing like that. I could never hurt her even if she cheated 1,000 times. But it wasn't even about that. I was a raging, snarling beast. I've never forgotten that feeling. And never want to feel it again. God, she ached for him. Has anything like that happened since? She asked. He shook his head as regret glossed his eyes. Even though he hadn't hurt anyone, he kept everyone at arm's length. Sighing, Josie bent forward to meet him over the table. As she took his hands and entwined her fingers with his, he tried to pull away. She held tight, her heart skipping a beat. It wasn't your fault, she heard herself say. You didn't know what to expect, that's all. Anyone walking into that situation would have lost his mind. You just happened to turn into a wolf too. And that wasn't your fault either. You have to stop beating yourself up over it and move on. You're too forgiving. And you deserve so much better than I can give you, he said. But I can't stay away. I've tried and still I'm drawn to you like no other. The dream we shared is proof of that. It was the strangest thing, yet it felt so right. You shouldn't want to be with me, not even for one night, as you put it. He squeezed her hands. It only makes pulling away more difficult. But Ryder. As the bakery door pushed open, a couple barged in laughing hysterically, cutting her short. Ryder's gaze raked over the couple as he sat back slouched into the chair with his elbow propped on the table, and his hand clenched into a fist. Grimacing as if he'd tasted something sour, Ryder's jaw clamped shut, and his lips formed a tight line. What is it? She asked, spinning around to check out the newcomers. They appeared to be a perfectly normal 30-something couple. The guy was medium height and round in the middle, and the woman was a pretty redhead with freckles dotting her nose and cheeks. As the woman latched onto the man's arm, he looked down at her and kissed the tip of her nose. Axel emerged from the back with a chilly greeting, and the man pointed to a pair of cupcakes in the middle of the counter. He waved his finger around, and a shiny gold ring on his left hand caught Josie's eye. Out of pure curiosity, she scoped out the woman's left hand. No matching ring. Strange. She spun back around. Do you know them? One of them. Ryder had paled in the last few seconds. He looked borderline sick. I know the man, but I've never seen the woman at his Chapter 16. Ryder should have said he knew the werewolf, because that's exactly what the man was. Matthew Long was a well-known member of the San Francisco Wolf Pack. He was also married and mated to his luminary, who was a brunette. Most definitely not the woman clinging to his side. Before they'd completed the bonding process, Mrs. Long had suspected Matthew of being unfaithful. Not knowing much about luminaries at the time, Ryder had taken the assignment and assured her it couldn't be true. After all, if fate had designed two people to be together, why would one have reason to stray? 4 months, he'd followed Matthew around and come up empty-handed. He tried to reassure Mrs. Long fated mates had to be perfect for each other, satiating each other's every need. That was the reason they'd been paired in the first place. Mrs. Long had insisted he continue the investigation, and so he had. For another 6 months. Then, after he'd pleaded with her to drop the case, Ryder caught Matthew with 2 mistresses. Confused and disgusted, he'd reported the findings to Mrs. Long. She'd confronted Matthew in Ryder's office. He'd fessed up immediately, swearing he'd never betray her trust again. With a solemn vow, he got down on bended knee, professed his undying love for his mate, and begged her for a fresh start. It hadn't even been a year since then. And here he was, letting some other woman wrap him up and claim him in the middle of a bakery. How do you know him? Josie whispered. It's nothing. But the anger rose in him anyway. We knew each other briefly. A long time ago. I see. Her gaze flipped back to the couple. Look how romantic they are and so clearly in love. They must be newlyweds. Ryder could barely watch as Matthew chose a caramel-topped cupcake and fed it to his mistress. She pursed her lips and giggled, using the fakest laugh he'd ever heard. Gagging, Ryder cleared his throat and drew Matthew's attention. Right over. With a gasp, Matthew dropped the cupcake, splattering it over the tile. My shoes, the redhead squealed, jumping back. You paid a fortune for these. And got icing all over them. Excuse me. She pounded her fist on the counter to get Axel's attention. Is there a restroom in this place? The baker hitched his thumb over his shoulder. Through there, make a right. And turn left down the hall. With an irritated snarl, she disappeared into the back. Matthew's lips twitched as he approached their table. Mr. McManus, you don't happen to remember me, do you? Oh, today was not Matthew's lucky day. I never forget a face. Ryder curled his fingers around Matthew's hand in a death grip. This is Josie Cole, soon to be the most infamous matchmaker in the area. Pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Cole. Miss, she corrected quickly. Mr. Long's eyebrows waggled. Is that right? A growl reverberated through Ryder's chest, and Matthew dropped his hand before he lost it. How is Mrs. Long? Ryder prodded, standing eye to eye with the lying cheat. Is she on her way? No. Matthew's eyes shifted to the door, the baker, Josie, and back again. She's stuck at home and not feeling well, I'm afraid. Scarlett and I are here to bring her a few cupcakes. To make her feel better. That's so sweet of you. Josie stood with them, twirling the silver cake topper in her fingers. Never heard of the cupcake cure, but I like the way you think. Did she always see the good in people? She might have been the only angel he'd ever met in his life. Matthew laughed tightly. Yes, well, I should pay so that when Scarlett comes, we can be on our way. It was great seeing you, Mr. McManus. One question before you go. As he simply couldn't drop it. Matthew spun on his heel as if he were in slow motion. Yes. When will it stop? The cheating, he meant. Judging from the blush that fanned over Matthew's neck and up to his cheeks, he knew exactly what Ryder had wanted to say. It won't, most likely. He smiled, but it was forced. Inside Matthew was a hollow, poor excuse for a man. Coming close, he whispered. The luminary bond is one thing, but physical needs are something different, and I have to get mine met. Luminary. Josie breathed. You're a... Matthew winked, acknowledging her thought. Werewolf. Ryder's fist clenched. But he held it at his side. No need to worry about my wife, though. We have an arrangement now. Holding on to a thread of restraint, Ryder seethed. $10 says it's one-sided. Matthew took a step closer. I don't care if you're fated or not, no two people are meant to be together in every way for 1,000 years. It's not natural. The floor disappeared beneath Ryder's feet as Matthew's words echoed through his head. His lungs grew tight, and suddenly the smell of sugary sweet buttercream teased his gag reflex. I don't know what you're talking about, Ryder said, but his voice lacked conviction. Of course you do. We're one and the same. Matthew patted him on the back as Scarlett skipped toward them. I knew it from the first time my wife came to see you. You defended me against her, insisting I wasn't seeing any other women. The way you slipped out into her head, phew. He whistled. Genius. Got me another 6 months, the best of my life. Ryder's throat parched. I thought you were innocent. Nah, don't buy that for a second. Matthew kissed Scarlett on the cheek, grabbed a handful of her ass and pushed her out the door. You thought just as I did, that cheating was an inevitable consequence to the marital death sentence, and you were right. Two people stuck in the same house in the same rut will eventually drive each other crazy. One of them will break. Fortunately for me, my wife does the breaking. Josie whimpered, a sound of shock and horror, and Ryder clenched his jaw until his back teeth cracked. As long as I keep my mistresses out of the house, Matthew went on, and make it home by 7, she can't say shit. What does she get out of the deal? Josie asked, her tone laced with venom. Because from where I'm standing it doesn't look like much. She gets to tell everyone she found her fated mate. He spread his arms wide. One of the oldest, most respected men in the wolf pack. Thousands of women would kill to be in her shoes. Ryder's lip curled in disgust. Thousands probably have. Oh, I'm sure the number's about that high. As Matthew shrugged, pure unfiltered rage blazed through Ryder's gut. He twitched, flexed, fought the urge to shift, rather than ball the energy into his gut. He channeled it into his fist and let it fly right into Matthew's jaw. The cheater went down straight to the ground, holding the side of his face. Blood gushed out of his mouth as his head went limp. Behind him, Josie gasped. He turned at the sound, glimpsing the same horror in her eyes that he'd seen on his ex. And then just as suddenly the terror was replaced with distress. Ryder, let's go. But he couldn't move. He'd done it again. It wasn't to the same degree. He hadn't shifted, but it was further proof that he was reckless, unable to simply walk away from a confrontation. The situation had been different. If Matthew had smacked Josie's ass rather than Scarlett's, he wouldn't have been able to stave off the shift. He couldn't even trust himself. As Josie tugged Ryder out of the bakery, she called her order to the baker, who nodded in compliance before tending to Matthew. That was insane, Josie said beside him once they were in his charger and on the way back to the hornblower. Are you all right? Am I all right? He scoffed into a sick laugh. I'm far from it. That guy was an asshole, she said, turning toward him. He deserved that. Ryder shook his head. No, you don't understand. The feelings were the same as They were before. If he'd touched you or said something derogatory to you, I could have killed him. But you didn't, Ryder. You probably broke his jaw and he might be drinking out of a straw for a while, but I bet his wife will thank you for that. Her hand found his leg and she squeezed. He seemed to get off on pushing your buttons. He had to know what was coming next. But she had no idea what was coming, or what he was capable of. And she couldn't see the change in her expression as she watched him strike. But he didn't miss it. He may have been able to refrain from killing Matthew, but that was because the jerk-off was distant from him and not threatening him personally. Given the right circumstances, he'd shift and unleash the beast again. He stared out the front window, doubt clouding his mind. She's better off without all this, Ryder said to himself as an odd tingle spread through his chest. Without me. Did you say something? Her sweet voice swept through the car, rejuvenating him, if only for a moment. No, he clenched his jaw, swallowed down everything he'd almost said. Nothing at all. Chapter 17. As Ryder took Josie's hand and escorted her into the dining area of the Hornblower, he couldn't meet her eye. He could feel shivers dance up her arm as he took her hand and led her toward the head table. In fact, now that he thought about it, he sensed happiness within her, hope and relief. Something had changed from the last time they were on the ship, when he sensed nothing but bitterness. She'd been closed off before. Now she was light on her feet, smiling ear to ear, giving the okay signal with her fingers. Carrie's eyebrows rose in question. Everything's perfect, Josie said as she took the seat at Carrie's side. How was the rehearsal? Carrie beamed. It was a tease. I can't wait for the real thing tomorrow. As Ryder took the seat on the other side of Josie, he scanned the room. Cameras in every corner. Hands clenched into fists in his lap so he wouldn't be tempted to reach out and touch her. He leaned over and said, "Looks like you're going to nail the television special." He nodded in thanks as the server brought over his requested dinner plate. Roasted bell peppers and asparagus. Not his usual, but something had drawn him to the choice on the menu. Are you happy about that? Of course. Batting thick lashes, she eyed his plate. I think the waiter might have made a mistake, though. That looks like it might be mine. No, he got it right. Ryder gulped down his glass of water in an effort to cool the simmer in his blood. Being close to Josie this way wasn't good for his health. Hauling her into his arms wasn't an option, so his nerves were frayed and every muscle was tense. I ordered the first vegetarian option. I ordered the second one. I know. That's why I got the first. But why? So you could have two choices for lunch. He stabbed a tiny chunk of bell pepper and held it out for her. Want to try? Sure. She went still as stone, and then slowly leaned forward and bit the vegetable from his fork. Thank you, she mumbled, covering her mouth with her napkin. My pleasure. And it absolutely was. He yearned to feed her, take care of her, protect her, and wrap her in his arms. But she didn't fit in his world. She'd never be able to accept him for what he was. He'd have to remember it, tattoo it across his forehead so he'd see it every day when he looked in the mirror. I forgot to ask, he said, as the waiter brought over her tomato basil pasta. He swallowed nails as he said, Did you ever find your guy? Who? Downing water to soothe the scratch in his throat, Ryder set down his glass. This was going to be harder than he'd planned. But it had to be done. When I came into your office, you said you were going to start looking for your match. Possessiveness spiked in his gut, but he had to go on. The words had to be said. How's it going? Say horrible. Terrible. I don't want anyone but you. I found a few possibilities. His stomach sank. Of course she had. She was classically beautiful, sharp as nails, and could melt a man with her sex appeal. To top it off, she was funny as hell. Stubborn and independently successful. It was a wonder she was still single in the first place. She picked at her dinner. But I've decided not to call any of them. Why not? He hid his grin with a stiff drink. As she glanced his direction, she quirked an eyebrow. I thought there might be other options to explore. After our talk in the bakery, I'm sure of it. He hardened beneath the weight of her stare. Felt bricks press down on his shoulders. Sensed the hint of possibility. This was it. The moment he could haul her into his arms and show her the options up close and personal, or face the grim reality of their situation. If he wasn't going to be in Josie's life, she should find happiness with someone else. Marriage was hard enough with two people who were from the same world who wanted the same things. As it was, he and Josie were lifetimes apart. His stomach clenched into a tight fist as he forced the words from his lips. There's no reason you shouldn't date around. When she stared, unmoving, unblinking, he repeated himself. She dropped her fork, wiped her mouth, turned to face him. You really think so? I do. She winced. What about all the things you said to me in the dream? Not 20 minutes ago you said you were drawn to me like no other. You said you couldn't stay away from me. He swallowed hard and said, we all have to wake up from our dreams sooner or later. I see. The subtle pout of her lower lip had him breaking in two. She nodded, her eyes glossing with tears. So you think I should call up Jeff Dumfrey and ask him out? Is that really the frontrunner's name? The second he got back to the office, he'd hunt Jeff Dumfrey down and cut off his hand so he'd never know what it was like to touch her. He has every point on my qualities list. He's a doctor, cat lover, and vegetarian. I'm sure he wouldn't mind sharing from his dinner either. Gee. Eyed Ryder's plate curiously. He comes from a big family and wants to start one of his own as quickly as possible. A low growl rumbled through his chest. He's tall, dark, and handsome and… Enough, Ryder muttered, putting up his hand to stop her. Another word and… He'd slam his fist through the table. I don't want to hear any more. She frowned. Then why? Because I was right before. There'll never be anything between us. He kept his voice low, although his heartbeat drummed in his ears. He could hardly look her in the eye. I haven't changed. I can't protect you from me. You don't have to. She touched his hand, sending electric currents zinging across his skin. You'd never hurt me. This, she gestured between them, feels so insanely right. I've been searching for this kind of connection my whole life, and I think I've finally found it. Words were right there, teetering on the edge of his lips, but they wouldn't come. He took another drink as he read the hope in her eyes. She wanted what her parents had. A marriage where two people lived the picture-perfect life, living, working, and breathing for each other. But she craved a normal reality, not one where her significant other could turn into a canine at every full moon. And that's what Josie needed to be happy. Something normal. Josie. He struggled to keep his voice emotionless as he squeezed her hand. I can't stand for you to see me differently, and eventually you will. I'll never be able to give you the life you want. I told you, she pressed, her tiny hand sliding in his. We can deal with the wolf stuff. I can try. Damn it, Josie, it's more than that. It's about this. He pointed to Carrie and Mitch as they leaned in for a kiss. That. Leaning closer, he pointed to an older gentleman in the back of the room as he pulled out the chair for his disabled wife. All of this. He circled the room with his hand. Marriage. Children, the house with the white picket fence. It's not a picture of reality, but it's what you seem to want to capture anyway. You want the dream to be reality, and that's fine, he said, staring into her gentle brown eyes. But you won't find it with me. Worrying her bottom lip into her mouth, Josie's gaze skipped around the room to each of the couples. If that's the way you feel. Last chance. Regret burned a hole in his chest, and he hadn't even put the nail in the coffin yet. It is. With a deafening thud, his heart clenched to a stop. You should call that guy Jeff or whatever from the application. Pain seared through him. Sounds like he can give you what you're searching for. Fine. She stood abruptly, dropping her napkin to the floor. I'm sure he'd be more than happy to be my date for the wedding tomorrow. As she walked away and Ryder went cold, Mitch mouthed, what the fuck? Shaking his head, Ryder dived back into his dish and fumbled with the fork. His hands went numb, and a cold, clammy wave washed over him. As Ryder glanced at the empty seat next to him, reality delivered a crushing blow. This was what you wanted. It didn't matter that he craved Josie so badly he couldn't breathe. Or that the tension in his muscles wouldn't release. He couldn't think about the fact that she was the only woman on the planet who could hollow him out with a single glance. He yearned for her on every level, yet he couldn't have her. She didn't belong at his side, even if fate seemed to think otherwise. He'd pushed her away to prove the point. Better get used to this lonely ache. He'd live unmated, alone, for the next 250 years of his life so that Josie could find someone who could give her what she needed. Chapter 18. Hello. Carrie's voice permeated the fog-like state that had taken over her brain. Earth to Josie. Blinking quickly in the harsh morning light, Josie refocused on her fingers. They were still held out over the bumper for the manicurist to paint. Apparently she'd chosen hideous big bird yellow as the color for the wedding tonight. Bizarre. She didn't remember that. Yeah, she said, quickly scanning the beauty shop where they'd spent the last 3 hours. People milled about, washing hands, painting toes, and styling hair. What do you need? I need my sister, my maid of honor, to have her head on straight today. Are you all right? Josie nodded. Why wouldn't I be? Because you just agreed to a stone massage after this. Carrie winced as the stylist shoved the comb for her veil into the mess of curls on top of her head. I get that you're stressed and all, but we don't have time for that. After this we have to hustle to the yacht, remember? We still have to take pictures of the bridal party before the wedding. Right. Of course. Tension coiled around Josie's heart. By the end of the day she'd be walking down the aisle with Ryder. Well, not with him, but beside him, arm in arm, and that'd be torturous enough. I must have forgotten. Actually, she didn't remember much of the morning. It had passed in a giant blur of mimosas and giddy laughter. Mitch's mother, grandmother, and a few female cousins had taken over the beauty salon, making Josie feel like the odd one out. Soon, Carrie would be a part of their family, and she'd be alone. The thought scared the hell out of her. And when had she gotten her hair styled? Had she spaced through the whole thing? Brushing her hands over the tendrils of hair falling around her face, Josie glanced in the mirror at the stylist station across the room. She looked like Shirley Temple, a head full of curls with blonde and chestnut strands highlighted throughout. And we're not finished talking about that date of yours, by the way, Carrie. Fired, watching Josie in the mirror. Just because I had to disappear to the opposite end of the shop from my toes doesn't mean we were done discussing it. Date. Carrie scoffed. Jeff Dumpster. The guy meeting you at the wedding tonight. Oh right. Dumfrey. Yeah, him, Carrie snapped. I thought you were coming stag so you could hook up with Ryder. That's the thing about a relationship, Carrie. Josie sighed. This was humiliating. Both people have to actually want to be with the other. It's a funny thing. Man, her sarcasm ran deep. She couldn't help it. But Mitch says he's crazy about you. She glared at her sister's reflection. Then he has an odd way of showing it. As the stylist arranged the veil around Carrie's shoulders, she smiled in approval. Maybe he'll come around when he sees you with Jeff Dumpster at the wedding. Dumfrey. Whatever. Carrie sighed heavily. Where do you find him on such short notice? Anyway, if he's an escort, you can tell me. No judgment here. God, Carrie, he's not an escort. How desperate do you think I am? On a scale from 1 to 10? Josie snatched a foot scrubber from the table next to her and chucked it at Carrie's back. Don't you dare answer that. I can answer whatever I want. I'm the bride. She pulled her shoulders back proudly. This is my day. When Josie didn't respond, Carrie said, what does he do? Drive her wild? Piss her off and turn her on? Oh wait, Dumfrey. He's a doctor. Carrie's eyes lit up. Well, that's a start. And probably an end too, Josie said as the manicurist finished painting the top coat. On paper he's everything I've ever wanted. He's stable, wants a big family, loves the restaurants, music, and movies that I do. What's he look like? He's handsome. An 8 on the hotness scale, I would say. Josie shrugged. He doesn't have the dark and mysterious vibe that Ryder has, but whatever. Don't need that. It's just really freaking hot, Carrie finished. I see it too, but it's not the most important thing. He's not Ryder. That's the most important thing. Know that tingly feeling you get when you first see someone? Josie whispered. That kick in your stomach and the flutter in your chest? It's not there with the new guy. Carrie slid off the chair and stood in front of Josie's nail station. You of all people have such a great sense for knowing when two people would work well together. Today is your 100th successful match. If you don't feel like this dumpster guy is going to be it for you, why are you wasting your time? Josie sighed, but her chest went tight. Because I'm tired of being alone. I'm sick of people laughing at me for being the single matchmaker who can't find love herself. Ah, Josie, no one's laughing at you. They might when they watch the Martha Silverstone special. Her heart pounded, as tears threatened to fall. I want to find someone, fall in love, have this crazy connection with him, get married and have a bunch of wild kids. And I found that connection. Or at least I thought I had. Carrie wrapped her arm around Josie's shoulder. Did you tell him how you feel? He doesn't want that future, so he doesn't want to hear it, she said, draped in Carrie's veil. For me or anyone. And I can't give up that dream. I can't set up another 100 couples, watch them fall in love and get married and be left behind. And then you're going to blend with Mitch's huge family and I'll really be alone. That'll never happen. Don't even think it. Carrie kissed her cheek and then straightened to fix her veil. I love you, Josie. And soon you're going to find someone who has all the qualities you need, someone who'd rather die than live without you. Yeah. I guess I got my hopes up that Ryder was the one. I felt things for him that I thought were undeniable, and then he proved me wrong. He seemed to deny them pretty easily. If he felt a fraction of what I did, he'd be the one dancing with me tonight instead of Dumpster. Her heart ached fiercely. She rubbed where she was raw but couldn't soothe the pain. That doc has got some huge shoes to fill. Leaning close, Carrie whispered. At least he doesn't have to fill 4 of them like Mitch does. The whole thing was still so strange. She'd panicked while Mitch shifted 2 nights ago, but once she saw him as a wolf, and then talked things over with Ryder, waves of serenity had washed over her. No matter what he was, man or wolf, he'd never hurt her. And Mitch would never hurt Carrie. It was the only truth she knew for certain, and the only reason she wasn't totally against the marriage moving forward. Whatever happens, we're family, Carrie said. It's one of the most precious gifts we have in this life. Speaking of gifts, careful not to smudge the freshly dried paint on her nails, she pushed back from the table and retrieved her purse from a bench on the side of the room. Removing a small blue and white wrapped package, she handed it over. For you and the lucky groom. Carrie swooned. You didn't have to get me anything. Yet she tore into the gift anyway. As the paper fell away and Carrie opened the box, her eyes went wide. You didn't. I did. Carrie held up 2 tickets to La Boheme for the Christmas Eve show. We're going. Me and you. Me and you. Josie wrapped her arms around the only family she had left in the world and squeezed. I told you we were going to make new memories. Who cares if Mitch doesn't like the opera? His loss is my gain. And if he changes his mind between now and then, he can use the second ticket to take you. Squeezing her tight, Carrie sighed. I love you so much. There's more, Josie said. Pulling back, Carrie lifted up a thin sheet of tissue paper. And then her laughter filled the salon. Earplugs. Unable to control her giggles, she pulled out a bright pink pair. She could barely talk through her hysterical fit. For vapor lock? Josie winked, chuckling with her sister. Just in case. You're the best, Carrie said, draping her arm around Josie's shoulder. Now, let's get out of here. This is a big day for both of us. I'm marrying the man of my dreams, and you're about to become the most successful businesswoman in the area. Carrie compared the two as if they were equal, but they weren't. Not by a long shot. She'd gladly give up her business for good if it meant she could be marrying the man of her dreams too. It was too bad Ryder had made it perfectly clear that wasn't going to happen. With a shaky breath, Josie focused on the future in front of her. A business that was about to boom and a wedding date with a perfectly normal doctor who most definitely did not howl at the full moon. It wasn't exactly what she wanted, but it had to count for something. Chapter 19. Squinting into the early afternoon sunlight, Ryder lined up his shot on the 9th hole on the Presidio golf course. Rather than spend the morning and afternoon stressing, Mitch had requested they squeeze in a game of golf before he set his vows. Under normal circumstances, Ryder wouldn't have complained about playing a round with Mitch on a brisk Sunday morning. But not today. The sickness from hell had fallen over him this morning. His insides were soured, spinning on high speed. He was crippled by rattling nerves. Migraines with teeth had pierced his temples and wouldn't release him. Everything inside him was begging to run to Josie, haul her against him, and apologize for being such a douche. But he couldn't, not now. He'd blown away any chance they could have ever had by pushing her into another man's arms. His entire body revolted at the thought, tensing, chilling, and weakening his Middle. What the hell had he been thinking? And what was he doing on the green pretending to give a shit about hitting? Under par? Running on fumes with less than 2 hours of sleep made his swing tight and his putting game pathetic. He was slicing every damn ball and chasing it back and forth over the green. Every time he tried to focus on his drive, images of Josie would stream through his mind, blinding him. When he tried to measure the distance on the putting green, she'd creep up again, calling to him in that honey-sweet voice of hers. She was the ultimate distraction, and she wasn't even present. Lining up, twisting back, Ryder geared up to swing. "I'm loving the new you," Mitch said in Ryder's backswing. "I'm kicking your ass all over this fairway." The ball hooked, arching far and wide off the fairway. Planting his club on the ground, Ryder shot his friend a nasty glare. As Mitch looked up from the scorecard, his gloating smile fell. "Not today, all right?" Ryder tossed his club in the bag and plopped into the golf cart. "I'm not in the mood. I can tell." Hopping out of the cart, Mitch lined up his shot, eyed the runway carefully, and shot straight down the center of the green. "Does it have something to do with a certain matchmaker? Think you're clairvoyant now?" Tossing his club and back, Mitch slid into the driver's seat and took off to their next shots. They bumbled along over well-mowed grass on a pathway, barely wide enough for the cart. Gusts of wind hauled over the next mound, but Ryder barely registered the chill. He was already covered head to toe in gooseflesh. Had been all morning. "I hear Josie was pretty torn up after the rehearsal. Carrie spent the better part of the night on the phone with her. She said she'd never heard her sister like that. Shit." Like a serpent, guilt wove around his lungs and squeezed until he couldn't breathe. "Don't tell me that." He ached for Josie, to be with her and hold her close. He hated being the one to cause her pain that way, but a little agony now was better than heart-wrenching, soul-searing pain later, right? Son of a bitch, he wasn't sure. "What did you say to her?" Mitch asked as they sped closer to Ryder's ball. "I told her I wasn't the right guy for her." "But you are." Ryder dropped his head to his shoulder and glared. "Can we drop it? You said it yourself. You're fated mates." Mitch jerked to a stop. "Don't know why you're denying it so hard." Without another word, Ryder marched up to his ball, took a deep breath that came out as an exasperated rasp, tried to shake the tension out of his shoulders, tried again and again. Damn, he was tight. He eyed the hole carefully, cocked back and swung. Even when something was planned so carefully, it fell apart. He'd lined up right, aimed true, and any other day he would have whacked the hell out of that ball. Today, though, it veered right into a sand pit. "Damn it," he roared. "Can't catch an effing break." And then he chucked his club as hard and as far as he could, twirled and spun in the air, coming to land on the opposite side of the cement pathway. Hands on his hips, Ryder charged down the hill toward the pit. "Ah, you don't need that club anyway." Mitch eyed where it fell and then, "I don't think I've ever seen you like this." Mitch drove beside Ryder as he marched down the fairway. "Whatever's brewing in your head isn't healthy for you and your golf game, or your pocketbook for that matter, if you're going to throw out your club after every swing." As Ryder reached the sand pit and eyed the ball jammed into the side of the mound, he jerked the appropriate wedge out of his bag, stormed to the pit, jaw clenched tight, took aim, hacked at the ball. Sand flew in a dust cloud right up into his eyes. "Son of a..." He rubbed his eyes, burning them further. "I can't fucking see." "It's not the sand's fault," Mitch grumbled. "You couldn't see with your eyes when they were clear either." Eyes burning as if they were on fire, Ryder pointed his wedge at Mitch. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" "Josie was perfect for you, brother. You're not going to be able to stay away from her. You can't. It's the laws of luminary attraction. You'll get weaker and sicker the longer you're apart. Two people are not meant to. I know you keep rambling about the same thing, but how are you going to feel when Josie moves on with someone else?" His words might as well have been a lance stabbing straight through Ryder's chest. "She will move on, you know. Women like Josie don't stay single long. It's too late." On a pained growl, Ryder took a second hack at the ball. He missed, sinking it deeper. "Damn it. She's already found someone else." "Really?" Mitch rested his elbows on the steering wheel. "The girl moves fast. She's bringing a date tonight." Mitch huffed into a sick laugh. "Fuck me." "No," Ryder groaned, scrubbing his hand over his face. "Fuck me. I shouldn't." have pushed her into it. Whoa, back up. Mitch got out of the cart but stayed behind the windshield as if using it for protection against him. You told her to bring someone to the wedding. Ryder couldn't answer or admit what happened, but he didn't need to. Mitch saw right through him as he always did. Ryder, I hate to say this to you, but at this very moment you're both the smartest and dumbest man on the planet. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking of what would make her happy, but I was a fucking idiot. Waves of nausea rolled through his stomach as he took another swing. This time the ball popped out of the sand and landed outside the green with a dull thud. Oh yeah, admit the truth and the ball cooperates. You don't think you're the one who could make her happy? No, I can't be. Ryder's hand shook as he lined up his shot. She'll never be able to accept me for what I am. Here's the thing. Mitch leaned over the hood of the golf cart to watch Ryder's putt. You can't beat yourself up over something that happened years ago with someone else because you've changed since then. Josie loves you. She's not going to think you're anything but you. She's not going to view you as a monster because you're so far from it. She's going to love the wolf part of you as much as this prick standing in front of me. Letting Mitch's words sink in, Ryder gripped the club shaft and shook out his hands as they began to sweat. Willing the trembling to subside, he aimed, tapped the ball and watched it drop in. There's another element to this you're forgetting. Ryder rested the club on his shoulder as he retrieved the ball. If by some miracle she can accept the wolf part of me and decides to become a werewolf herself, we'll live together 1,000 years. His stomach wrenched. No one can commit to staying together that long. Love like that is dead, Mitch. Wow, he said, his face an emotionless mask. Promise me you won't use that in your toast tonight. Ryder tossed the ball and club into the bag and fell back into the passenger seat. Come on, let's go. I'm tired of the game. But Mitch didn't move. Know what I see when I look at you? No, but I bet you're going to tell me. He rambled on without skipping a beat. I see a man who's given up. You don't look like you want to be out here golfing, and you love the game. It used to be one of your favorite things. Actually, now that I really look at you in the sunlight, you look like death. You're frowning and your pasty-ass skin is 50 shades of gray. Your shoulders are slumped as if all the joy has been sucked out of you, and you smell like you haven't showered today. Don't kill me for pointing it out, but it looks as if you've lost the will to live. He didn't want to live without Josie. Not for a second. As the thought struck, a deep, resounding ache settled in his middle. I can't pin her down to a life with me, Ryder said, a giant hole forming in his chest. But I'll die without her. Mitch started the cart. Just don't die today, all right? I'm getting married later. Hopefully after you shower and shave. Selfish prick. As they drove toward the next tee, Ryder's pocket vibrated. Removing his cell, he checked the screen. Unknown number, he said, and read the text aloud. Mr. Boone will be at the Sheraton Fisherman's Wharf Hotel with a brunette tonight at 5. If you want to catch him cheating, now's the time. He frowned as he reread the anonymous message. Interesting. Think it's solid? Ryder shrugged as his 100th migraine of the day lanced through his temples. I don't know, but I should probably head over and figure that out. He pocketed his phone as the desire to catch Mr. Boone with his pants down fizzled away. The thrill of the chase that normally accompanied this moment was noticeably missing. Before meeting his luminary, he was fine with how things were going in his life. He got a rush out of catching cheaters in the act. He'd spend morning and night following them around, proving how many scoundrels roamed the streets. But he had no idea how empty his life truly was, how completely void of happiness and fire and purpose. Until now, Josie had changed everything. How would he live another day without